Hello friend, welcome to Stories by Tocci. We bring you interesting folk tales. Please don't forget to hit the like button, please share, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for doing so. Now let's get into the story. The first time Ruthie Daniels stood before the mirror in the east wing of the Blake mansion, she didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. The gown she wore cost more than the house she was born in. The necklace hugging her throat had diamonds that caught the sun like tiny whispers of fire. And yet, behind the shimmer and silk, there was an emptiness that clung to her ribs like a second skin. Anthony Blake's mansion stood like a cold monument to wealth, tall and stiff-lipped, but Ruthie knew the walls were not built with love. They were stacked brick by brick with strategy, sealed with transactions. She married into this empire not because she believed in fairy tales or happily ever afters, but because she understood deals. Hers was the kind of marriage that didn't come with doves or sweet nothings. It came with clauses, signatures, and stiff handshakes. The moment she signed the marriage agreement, the air around her shifted. It smelled like old money and fresh betrayal. Still, she smiled. After all, the world claps louder for a beautiful lie than it does for a bitter truth. Anthony, with his $1,000 suits and $10,000 secrets, had made his intentions clear even without words. Marry me, play your part, keep quiet, and you'll never want for anything. But Ruthie had learned long ago that want and peace were two different currencies. One could buy her the world, and the other could keep her sane. What Anthony didn't know was that Ruthie wasn't a bird in a cage. He assumed she was the wind, waiting for a storm. She didn't need a soothsayer to tell her that Celeste Harlow was more than a project coordinator. The woman walked like the mansion belonged to her and spoke to Anthony like she owned the rights to his soul. Her laughter echoed in the halls at strange hours, laced with perfume and possession. Ruthie would sit on the veranda, sketching designs in her notebook, while Celeste strutted past with the air of a peacock that had killed its competition. Ruthie never looked up, never asked questions. She wasn't born with a silver spoon, but she knew when to hold her tongue and sharpen her thoughts. That was the first rule of surviving in a house built on secrets. Observe more than you speak. Every night when the lights dimmed and the servants retreated to their quarters, the whispers began. The faint hum of voices from the study, the low clink of glasses, the sudden hush whenever Ruthie's slippers padded down the hallway. It was a quiet war, and Ruthie fought it with patience. She noticed the small things, the lipstick-stained napkin left on Anthony's desk, the duplicate key Celeste carried without apology, and the way Anthony's smile only ever reached his teeth, never his eyes. The more Ruthie saw, the more she realized she was not the wife. She was the curtain drawn to hide what went on behind it. And yet she played her role like a seasoned actress on stage, because sometimes, to catch a fox, you have to pretend to be the hen. Her silence wasn't submission, it was a strategy. And every yes dear she offered was a thread she was pulling toward a net of revelation. On the day of the charity launch, Ruthie stood beside Anthony, dressed in navy silk, her fingers gently laced with his. Cameras flashed, reporters praised their elegance, and socialites gushed over the love story they thought they saw. Celeste stood off to the side, smiling through clenched teeth, her designer heels digging into the grass like claws. Ruthie saw the tight grip she had on her wine glass, the twitch of her lip when Anthony placed a perfunctory kiss on Ruthie's cheek. That kiss was not affection, it was theater, and every glance Celeste threw was a burning review. But Ruthie, graceful as ever, smiled through the storm. Her eyes danced with secrets as she made polite conversation with guests. She heard the murmurs, how poised she was, how lucky she must be, how perfect they looked together. Perfect, if only they knew. That night, back inside the mansion, Anthony barely said a word. He poured himself a drink, asked if she was happy, and left before she could answer. Ruthie sat on the edge of their massive bed, removing her earring slowly. The weight of the night was heavy on her shoulders, but she didn't crack. She was made of scar tissue and stubbornness. Later, she found herself in the laundry room, hiding the blood-stained napkin Celeste had used earlier after cutting her finger. Ruthie placed it in a Ziploc bag and dropped it into the hidden drawer beneath the kitchen tiles. One by one, she was gathering proof, not to confront, not yet, but to build a case. Not just legally, but emotionally, for herself. One day, someone would ask her why she stayed, and she would have answers written in silence. There was something unsettling about a home where the help knew more than the wife. Ruthie often found herself in the company of Lydia, the head cook, a plump woman with tired eyes and hands that smelled of time and regret. Lydia had served in that house for 12 years and had seen women come and go, but never one who asked about her grandchild or helped peel potatoes when no one was watching. "You're too soft for this place," Lydia once said, not unkindly. Ruthie only smiled. She knew better. There's steel beneath satin, and sometimes it's the quiet ones who leave the deepest dents. Still, the loneliness came in waves. She'd wake at 3 a.m., walk the corridors, and sit by the piano Anthony never touched. She'd press a key and let the sound echo into the hollow rooms, hoping it'd wake something inside her. But there was no music in a house where love was just a prop. When she was 7, Ruthie's mother had told her, "When a man brings you flowers with no soil, don't be fooled. It's not meant to grow." And now, as she looked at the massive portrait of her and Anthony in the hallway, she finally understood. That smile she wore, perfect, polished, painted, was her mask. But masks slip, and when they do, faces fall. Ruthie wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was preparing to rise. And the thing about rising is, sometimes it looks like silence, but it sounds like thunder once it hits the sky. It was during one of those quiet East Bridge evenings, when the sky dimmed like a curtain drawing over a tired play, that Ruthie first realized how much of the house didn't belong to her. Not the walls, not the whispers, not even the scent in the hallways. Anthony's cologne lingered like ownership, and Celeste's perfume, sweet and sharp like rotting fruit in disguise, trailed behind her footsteps. Ruthie moved through the halls like a shadow made of silk, seen but not acknowledged, present but never invited. Her routine had become ritual. Each morning she'd sketch by the fountain, nod at the gardeners, receive her green tea from the housemaid without speaking, and pretend not to hear Celeste's high heels clicking down the stairs long before Anthony had finished his first cup of espresso. The rhythm of it all was like a dance rehearsed one too many times, so smooth it made her skin crawl. One Tuesday afternoon, Ruthie lingered at the corner of the study hallway, half hidden behind the column Anthony had installed with imported marble. She wasn't eavesdropping, not in the traditional sense. She merely listened, with intent, and what she heard hardened something in her chest. Anthony's voice, low but firm, murmuring into his phone, "She's temporary, Celeste. We needed this for the board. She has no teeth." Then a pause, followed by Celeste's laugh, high, cruel, triumphant. "She's a puppet, darling, and you're holding the strings." Ruthie leaned back, her heart drumming, not from shock, but from something older, recognition. That was the night she stopped being Anthony's puppet. She wouldn't yank the strings just yet. No. First, she'd tie knots with them. She started with the security cameras. There were 24 in total across the Blake estate, 18 indoors, 6 outdoors. She knew because she asked Raymond, the gruff night guard with a missing tooth and an affection for boiled plantain. Ruthie brought him supper every Thursday, a habit that started when she learned the chef never bothered with night staff meals. Over time, Raymond warmed to her, spilling bits of information between bites. She learned which parts of the house the cameras avoided, where Celeste usually parked when she stayed over, and which guest rooms were mysteriously off-limits to the rest of the staff. Ruthie's questions were never direct. She didn't ask about affairs or schemes. Instead, she asked about movements, changes, patterns. People talk when they feel sane, and Ruthie was learning to be invisible just enough to make others transparent. That's how she discovered the key fob Anthony kept behind the liquor cabinet, the one that unlocked a drawer filled with non-business documents, private letters from Celeste, secret lease agreements, and one small black USB. She didn't touch it, not yet. But she memorized its location, right beneath the aged cognac bottle with the gold foil neck. That night, Ruthie returned to her room and sat on the edge of her bed, notebook in hand. Her sketches had turned into diagrams, boxes, arrows, timelines. If anyone walked in, they'd think she was designing a building, not dismantling a lie. She knew she had no allies in this house, only opportunities. And each time someone underestimated her, she filed it under evidence. Not for court, not even for justice, but for the day she would speak, and they would listen, wide-eyed and silent. It was at a private gala in Glenmere that Ruthie began testing her voice. The event was hosted by one of Anthony's old university friends, a man who smelled like cigar smoke and bad investments, but whose connections could stir any Eastbridge headline. Anthony, suave and cold as ever, introduced Ruthie like a polished trophy. My wife, Ruthie Daniels Blake, a talented designer. He said it with a smirk, as though her talent was an accessory he had graciously allowed her to keep. Celeste stood a few feet away, dressed in crimson silk, her lips curled like she tasted something sour. Ruthie played her part, smiling, nodding, exchanging pleasantries. But when the conversation turned toward women and business, Ruthie cleared her throat and stepped into the spotlight. Sometimes, she said, voice soft but sure, women aren't waiting to be rescued. Sometimes they're just waiting for the right moment to reclaim what's theirs. The room went quiet for half a breath, then someone clapped. And just like that, the applause grew. Anthony stiffened. Celeste's wineglass tipped, a single drop staining the edge of her dress. Ruthie turned her back on them both and walked toward the garden. The air outside was crisp, perfumed with lemon blossoms, but what filled her lungs was not air, it was resolve. That evening, as they drove home in silence, Anthony glanced at her once, as if trying to decipher a new equation. Ruthie met his gaze in the window's reflection. Let him wonder, she thought. Let him feel the tremble before the quake. Days turned into weeks, and Eastbridge moved on like a page turning in a heavy novel. But within the mansion, things were shifting. Celeste grew impatient, her presence bolder, her voice sharper. Ruthie noticed that even the staff had started adjusting. Lydia now offered updates before Ruthie asked. The gardener left roses by her sketch table, and Raymond stood straighter when she passed. Power had a scent. It lingered before it was named. Anthony, meanwhile, became unpredictable. He'd appear in her room late at night with 2 glasses of wine and false stories about his childhood, trying to sew intimacy like a tailor out of thread. Ruthie listened, but her smile was stitched from silence. He once asked, "Are you happy, Ruth?" She replied, "Is the ocean ever full?" It confused him. Good. She wanted him off balance. One afternoon, Ruthie walked into the library and found Celeste rearranging the bookshelves, wearing Anthony's shirt like a victory flag. They locked eyes. "You're still here?" Celeste asked. Ruthie smiled, walking past her. "So are termites. Doesn't mean they built the house." That night, she wrote in her journal, "I think she's going to make a move soon. I need to be ready." And just like that, the game turned into a countdown. The morning it happened was drenched in stillness, the kind that clung to walls like dampness before a storm. Ruthie had spent the night restless, sketching in the kitchen where the ticking of the clock filled the silence like a dripping tap. Her fingers trembled over her journal as she wrote down every shift in Celeste's behavior, how she no longer avoided confrontation but welcomed it, how she left her car parked crooked on the driveway as though daring someone to comment, how she laughed louder and stayed longer in Anthony's private wing. Ruthie's instincts buzzed like a lit match hovering over dry leaves. She knew something was brewing. The Blake mansion had grown too small for three egos, and Celeste's jealousy was a scorpion itching for a sting. Around 10 a.m., Ruthie climbed the staircase, barefoot robe trailing behind her like smoke. Her plan was to retrieve a folder from the guest room, but she hadn't taken 3 steps up before Celeste's voice rang out from above, honey-laced but sharp enough to cut glass. "Going somewhere, Cinderella?" Ruthie looked up. Celeste leaned against the balustrade, wearing Ruthie's own scarf around her neck like a joke. The morning sun painted her features with cruelty. Ruthie didn't answer. She took another step. Celeste stepped forward too, hands gripping the rail, eyes glinting like wet stone. "Why do you keep pretending you matter? You were bought, darling." "Just a stand-in bride. No one's writing ballads about you." Ruthie remained silent. There was power in restraint, but danger in silence too. When she placed her foot on the next step, it all happened too quickly. Celeste's hand reaching, Ruthie losing balance, the world tilting like a broken carousel. Her scream was sharp, brief. Then a thud, her body crumpling like parchment at the base of the staircase. The seconds after the fall unraveled like thread caught in a thorn bush, pain slow, jagged, and refusing to stop. Ruthie couldn't move. Her limbs were heavy, her breath shallow, but her ears still worked. She heard the click of heels coming down, one step at a time, not in panic, but in deliberation. Celeste crouched beside her, her shadow falling over Ruthie like a blanket woven with venom. "You weren't supposed to survive," she whispered, voice trembling, though whether from guilt or rage, Ruthie couldn't tell. The sentence hit harder than the marble had. It was a confession soaked in malice, too casual to be regret, too deliberate to be fear. Ruthie wanted to scream, but her voice was trapped beneath her ribs. The house was silent, as if holding its breath. Celeste stood and walked away, her steps light, unbothered. Ruthie's eyes fluttered, her mind floating between the hallway light and the ache crawling through her spine. The next thing she saw was the blurred face of Lydia, the cook, hovering above her with tears running down her face. "Jesus, no! Somebody help! Madame Ruthie!" Her voice rang through the halls like a fire alarm. Minutes later, the mansion was flooded, maids running, a driver calling an ambulance, Raymond yelling into his walkie-talkie. Anthony wasn't home. He wouldn't arrive until after the paramedics had wheeled her out, stiff as a statue, barely blinking. But Ruthie remembered everything. She remembered the whisper, the smirk, the absence of shock. The betrayal wasn't in the push, it was in the calm that followed. The hospital smelled like bleach and betrayal. Ruthie lay there for days, stitched up and stiff, eyes trained on the ceiling while her mind rewound every moment of that morning like a scratched cassette. Doctors came and went with voices too polite, eyes too curious. Nurses whispered, "No visitors yet?" and exchanged glances when they thought she wasn't listening. The pain was bearable. The silence was not. It wasn't until the 4th day that a male nurse, young and wide-eyed, leaned over and whispered, "Your husband hasn't come, but a man keeps calling." Blocked number. Same question every time, "Is she dead yet?" The word sent an icy wave down her back. Ruthie blinked hard. There it was, truth, stripped of all disguises. If there had been any shadow of doubt before, it had now disappeared. Anthony knew. Perhaps he hadn't planned it, but he was complicit in it. The man who had once offered her a life paved with convenience had now laid a trap soaked in silence. Ruthie closed her eyes and prayed, not for healing, but for clarity. That night, when she was alone and the hallway light flickered against the window pane, she reached for her phone and sent a single message to the only person she still trusted in Eastbridge. "Lydia, hide the black USB. Behind the cognac. Do it now." She received a reply with just one word, "Done." Ruthie exhaled. She was still in the storm, yes, but she had found the eye. And from there, She could see everything. When Anthony finally arrived, he brought lilies. White, perfect, funereal. He stepped into her room like a man visiting a stranger, the scent of his cologne arriving before he did. "You gave us a scare," he said, voice polished but distant, like a politician caught in the wrong room. Ruthie met his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't flinch. "Did I?" she asked, her voice low, steady. His eyes narrowed. "What were you doing near the staircase barefoot?" She laughed, dry, sharp, bitter like unripe fruit. "Trying to fly." Anthony didn't respond. He placed the flowers beside her, untouched, unwanted. For 10 minutes, he spoke about recovery, about rest, about media control. Ruthie listened as if he were describing the weather. When he left, the nurse rolled her eyes. "He didn't ask how you were." Ruthie looked at the lilies. Because he already knew. That night, a familiar face peeked in. Detective Amanda Kerr, a distant cousin of Ruthie's late mother, now working in Glenmere PD. "I got your message," she said, her tone clipped. "Tell me everything." Ruthie didn't waste time. She poured out the past, every thread, every whisper, every inch of her fall, both literal and emotional. Amanda listened with clenched fists. "We'll need proof," she said. Ruthie smiled. "I have more than that. I have their patterns. I have their pride. And pride, Amanda, is the heaviest rope they'll hang themselves with." Ruthie returned to the Blake mansion on a gray-skied Thursday, her body weaker but her spirit stiff as iron rebar hidden under velvet. The housekeeper had aired out her room, changed the linens, even arranged lilies in a fresh vase, but Ruthie asked her to take them out. "No more flowers that look like apologies," she said quietly. Her steps were slow but deliberate, one foot in front of the other like a soldier marching through ash. The staircase loomed before her like an unspoken threat, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she ran her fingers along the balustrade, as if touching a crime scene no one had cordoned off. Celeste was nowhere in sight, but her perfume lingered faintly in the hallway, a ghost wrapped in floral deceit. Anthony, true to form, pretended nothing had happened. He greeted Ruthie with a half-hug, made a show of asking the staff to be gentle with her, and then disappeared into his office for another conference call. Ruthie watched him walk away, his back straight, his lies folded neatly into the fabric of his suit. The man could have sold snow to Eskimos and still asked for a tip. That evening, she met with Amanda in the greenhouse behind the estate, an old glass structure filled with orchids, once built for Anthony's mother. "Do you trust me enough to go deeper?" Amanda asked, her voice thick with caution. Ruthie nodded. "I'm already in the ocean. I might as well find pearls." Over the next few weeks, Ruthie worked quietly but relentlessly. Every corner of the mansion became a breadcrumb trail. Amanda, dressed as an estate contractor, came in one afternoon under the pretense of assessing a plumbing issue. She wore mirrored sunglasses and spoke in clipped tones, but her ears were wide open. With Ruthie's help, she photographed hidden drawers, documents tucked behind bookshelves, and the black USB that Lydia had buried in a decoy biscuit tin. It contained damning records, wire transfers from Anthony to Celeste's offshore account, falsified invoices under a fake NGO, and even a digital folder labeled Lance Report, which referenced a hit-and-run incident from 3 years ago involving Celeste and a teenage cyclist in Glenmere. Ruthie's stomach churned reading the reports. She was sleeping under the same roof as people who chewed morals like gum and spat them on carpets. What disturbed her most wasn't the documents, but the casualness with which they were labeled, like sins filed in alphabetical order. Meanwhile, Anthony's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He started showing up at Ruthie's door uninvited, offering tea, stories, even poorly timed compliments. "I've been thinking we should go away somewhere quiet," he said one night, his tone just off enough to sound rehearsed. Ruthie smiled politely and locked the door behind him. Her journal grew heavier with each passing day, no longer a sketchbook, but a roadmap of manipulation. One night, while everyone was asleep, she left a flash drive in Raymond's locker with Amanda's initials on it. Trust, she'd learned, wasn't built with grand gestures. It was cemented in the cracks between danger and survival. Celeste returned 3 days before Ruthie's public appearance at the Glenmere Women's Empowerment Gala. She waltzed into the house like the past month had been nothing more than a minor scheduling error, kissed Anthony in the study, and offered Ruthie a glass of wine in the same breath. "You're looking radiant," she purred, her voice dipped in venom and velvet. Ruthie took the glass, not to drink, but to watch. "You've got something on your cheek," she said, handing Celeste a napkin she dusted lightly with fingerprint powder. Celeste, ever vain, wiped her face and left her mark behind. Ruthie pocketed the napkin. That same night, Anthony received an anonymous message on his burner phone. "Your lies are unraveling faster than her stitches." He smashed a vase in the foyer and yelled at a housemaid. Ruthie stood at the top of the stairs, watching him. "Broken things belong together," she said softly. He looked up, confused, but she was already gone. When the night of the gala arrived, Ruthie dressed in a flowing emerald gown with embroidery shaped like phoenix feathers. Her hair was swept into a crown braid, and her lips were the color of ripened plums. She took the stage at the midpoint of the event and spoke not as a wife, but as a witness. "There are women who survive fire," she began, "but there are also women who become it." The crowd grew silent. Then she introduced Amanda Kerr as the closing speaker. And Amanda didn't come with a speech. She came with receipts. Amanda's presentation was subtle at first. Photos of anonymous corruption, discussions on hidden abuse within elite marriages, a nod to women who are often silenced by luxury. But halfway through, she shifted tone. "Let's talk about what courage looks like when it's not dramatic," she said. "Sometimes it wears a house robe and walks with a cane." A screen descended behind her, and the audience gasped. Displayed were scanned files from the USB, bank statements tied to Celeste, and a voice recording played aloud, Anthony's voice saying, "She's temporary. She has no teeth." The room erupted. Reporters scrambled for quotes. Sponsors gasped. Celeste turned pale as salt. Anthony stood up and tried to walk toward the podium, but security blocked him. Ruthie didn't move. She sat in the front row, still as ice on porcelain, her hands folded. Amanda ended with, "Power used to silence will eventually learn it doesn't last." By the time the gala ended, headlines were flying through Eastridge faster than wildfire. Ruthie didn't return to the mansion. She stayed at a suite Amanda arranged, where she took a long bath and let the lavender-scented water wash over her skin like absolution. That night, as she lay in the crisp hotel sheets, her phone buzzed with a message from Lydia. "He's been pacing. Celeste hasn't stopped crying. Something's cracking." Ruthie smiled in the dark. "Good," she whispered. "Let it all fall." By dawn, the story had spread across Eastridge like rain on a tin roof, loud, persistent, and impossible to ignore. Every local station, online blog, and city magazine was rehashing details from the gala, many spinning it as the silence that screamed. Photos of Ruthie sitting stoically in emerald, Amanda standing firm at the podium, and Celeste's pale, stunned expression began circulating like currency. Anthony's name, once synonymous with power and polish, now danced in headlines with words like scandal, fraud, and conspiracy. But Ruthie didn't bathe in the glow of vengeance. She sat quietly in her hotel suite, sipping black coffee from a porcelain cup, her body wrapped in a robe that smelled faintly of lavender and unfinished closure. The television played on mute. Her phone vibrated ceaselessly, but she answered no one. Not yet. Across town, Anthony stormed through his office like a bull in a collapsing china shop. His staff avoided his gaze, and his calls to their legal team went unanswered. Celeste had locked herself in the guest room of the estate, blinds drawn, muttering about betrayal and bad timing. Anthony punched a hole through the cedar door of the wine cellar before collapsing onto the leather couch, his breath ragged. "She played us," he muttered. "She played us both." The weight of his words settled over the room like smoke without fire. He hadn't just underestimated Ruthie. He dismissed her humanity, treated her like wallpaper, forgetting that even paint can peel and reveal what lies beneath. What truly rattled Anthony wasn't the exposure. It was the elegance of Ruthie's unraveling. There had been no screaming, no threats, no wild displays. Just presence. Quiet, collected, unshakable presence. It was like watching a paper cut bleed into a wound no one knew was there until it soaked the entire sleeve. As his financial team scrambled to contain the damage, as the board of Blake Industries began an emergency vote of confidence, Anthony faced the rare taste of losing control, and it was bitter as gall. Meanwhile, Ruthie met Amanda in a quiet tea house tucked between two forgotten buildings. No paparazzi, no press, just two women and a pot of hibiscus tea steaming between them. "They're circling him," Amanda said, stirring her cup slowly. "Legal departments, tax authorities, even some of his shareholders are leaking internal memos." Ruthie listened, face unreadable. "And Celeste?" she asked, her voice barely above a hum. Amanda sighed. "She's running scared. Canceled her business licenses, tried to transfer funds from her Belize account, but it's frozen. She's grasping at cobwebs." Ruthie nodded once. "Let them unravel each other," she said. "We don't need to do the work they're already doing to themselves." That evening, Ruthie drafted a letter to her lawyer, instructing him to initiate divorce proceedings. She requested no alimony, no assets, only enforcement of the safety clause she'd added 6 months earlier, the one Anthony signed blindly, too distracted to read the fine print. And it was a condition, should she ever be physically harmed within the marriage, all joint properties would revert to her protection for security reasons. Legal, binding, and already notarized. The media frenzy intensified with every passing hour, but Ruthie remained silent. Her name now a symbol people attached their own meanings to. Some called her a survivor. Others labeled her a genius. A few even accused her of being a quiet storm who always intended to bring Anthony down. But Ruthie paid them no mind. Truth doesn't shout, it lingers. She began returning to her studio space in the old textile district, where sunlight pooled across wooden floors like forgiveness. There she unpacked old sketches, garments she designed during her first year of marriage, when she was still trying to fit herself into a life that didn't belong to her. One design caught her attention, a long crimson coat with feathers stitched into the collar and cuffs. She remembered the title scribbled at the bottom in faded ink, "A Phoenix Knows When to Burn." That was the coat she would wear to the final hearing. Amanda stood beside her as her legal team, calm and precise, presented their case in court. The judge, an aging man with tired eyes and a sharp tongue, read the clauses slowly, pausing at the one about marital harm and automatic transfer of ownership. Anthony sat beside his attorney, looking like a statue chiseled from regret and disbelief. Celeste was absent. Rumors said she fled to Morocco but was denied entry. When the judge announced his decision that Ruthie would retain control over all property jointly acquired during the marriage, and Anthony would pay damages for emotional and physical endangerment, no one clapped. No one gasped. It was not a moment of drama. It was justice, plain, soundless, and final. That night, Ruthie didn't return to the mansion. Instead, she walked through Eastbridge's Central Plaza, wearing a scarf that caught the wind like a flag of quiet rebellion. She paused by the bakery she once admired from a distance, then entered and ordered her favorite, warm coconut bread and lemon tea. As she sat by the window, a little girl tugged her mother's hand and pointed. "That's the lady from the TV, right?" The mother looked over and smiled. "Yes, baby, that's her." Ruthie didn't look away. She returned the smile, small but real. Later, When the streets were nearly empty and the sky spilled stars across the dark like glitter in a jar, Amanda joined her. "You're free," she whispered. Ruthie tilted her head. "Freedom feels quiet," she said. "Like the sound after a slammed door." Amanda chuckled. "And what now?" Ruthie looked out the window. "Now I breathe. Then I rebuild." She didn't want to be remembered as the woman who exposed a powerful man or survived a dangerous mistress. She wanted to be remembered as the woman who chose not to rot in silence. As the city continued to buzz with headlines, Ruthie began writing, not just in her journal, but in a new manuscript titled The Shape of Unspoken Things. And in the quiet of her apartment, she wrote one sentence again and again, as though etching it into the bone of the future. Some flowers don't bloom in sunlight. Some choose the storm, because only there can they truly grow. Weeks trickled into months like candle wax down a bottle. Quiet, deliberate, marking time with every slow drop. Ruthie didn't rush to fill the void Anthony and Celeste left behind. She let silence sit in the corners of her life like a familiar visitor. Her days were no longer dictated by press releases or whispered threats in chandelier-lit hallways. Now, her morning routine consisted of herbal tea on her modest balcony, sunlight soft on her bare shoulders, and birds that knew her by scent. She moved into a refurbished apartment tucked above a florist shop in Old Eastbridge, where the walls hummed with stories from lives lived simply. She no longer answered calls she didn't recognize and didn't feel the need to explain her absence from society pages. People had made a spectacle of her strength, turned her suffering into headlines, and romanticized her endurance. But Ruthie knew better. Strength wasn't about surviving a fall or winning in court. It was about deciding to live without bitterness choking your breath. There were days the past came crawling, uninvited and heavy, but she'd learned not to swat at ghosts. She let them sit, acknowledged them, and then politely showed them the door. Not all wounds bleed, and not all scars shout. Some whisper their lessons with every sunrise. Ruthie had learned to listen without flinching. And now, finally, she was learning to laugh again, not because life was perfect, but because she had chosen not to let the broken pieces cut her anymore. The Blake estate, once a shining emblem of power perched high above Eastbridge Hill, now stood like an abandoned opera stage, beautiful from afar, but echoing with forgotten songs and dust-coated grandeur. Anthony, stripped of his board seat and deserted by the very people who once hung on his every word, was last seen exiting a downtown financial building with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder, jaw clenched and dignity fraying like the hem of a poorly stitched suit. Celeste's legal troubles compounded like unpaid debts. Her arrest came quietly at a private airfield outside Glenmere when she tried boarding a jet with a forged identity and cash sewn into the lining of her coat. The media covered it for a few days, then grew bored and moved on. That was the thing about scandal. It burns bright and quick, but ash doesn't sell papers. Ruthie followed none of it. She only learned of their downfall when Amanda stopped by with a bottle of wine and a smirk. "Guess what I'm not going to talk about," she said, plopping on the couch with the glee of someone who just dropped a secret in someone else's lap. Ruthie laughed for the first time in a while, real and deep, the kind of laugh that shakes loose old grief from the lungs. "Then don't," she replied, raising her glass. "Let's drink to the things we never say but always feel." That night they played old music on Amanda's phone and danced barefoot in Ruthie's kitchen. Two women reclaiming joy in the middle of ordinary space. Ruthie didn't need an audience. She just needed rhythm. As time passed, Ruthie began to pour her energy into something she'd shelved for far too long. Her designs. Not for prestige, not for runways, but for the women who sat in rooms like she once did, wondering if silence was strength or surrender. She started a small boutique in the textile district called Threaded Grace. It wasn't flashy, didn't have celebrity endorsements or marble floors, but every garment told a story. There were jackets named after emotions, dresses stitched with quotes hidden in the lining, and scarves embroidered with prayers no one could read unless they tilted the fabric toward the sun. Clients came not just to shop, but to sit, sip tea, and tell their stories. Ruthie listened, not as a survivor above them, but as one among them. Her boutique became a quiet sanctuary for women who'd seen the storm and refused to drown in it. Sometimes she would close early, light scented candles, and so late into the night, her fingers threading forgiveness into fabric. Her staff, 5 women from different walks of life, all called her Ma Ruthie, not out of obligation, but affection. They knew she didn't wear her strength on her sleeve. She stitched it into every hem, every collar, every unseen corner of her work. The boutique wasn't about profit. It was about presence. And Ruthie, once the woman whose silence was mistaken for weakness, now spoke volumes through threads and patterns that couldn't be erased by scandal or time. One afternoon, as golden light spilled through the boutique windows and laughter echoed from the back room, Ruthie received a letter, handwritten, unsigned, but familiar in tone. The writer didn't beg forgiveness or spew excuses. It simply read, "You saw everything, didn't you? Even when I thought you weren't watching. I hope one day I learn how to live without hurting good things." Ruthie folded the letter and placed it inside a book titled The Anatomy of Shadows on her shelf, then walked to the front of the store and helped a teenage girl choose her first dress for prom. Life, she had learned, wasn't about having closure that wrapped itself neatly with ribbons. That night, she walked home beneath a moon full and generous, her steps light. A small boy waved at her from a balcony, and she waved back with a smile that had taken years to sharpen. She opened her apartment window and let the wind dance through the curtains. Then she sat at her writing table, turned a blank page, and scribbled 6 words that had carried her from the marble floor to this moment. I saw it all. I stayed. And somewhere, far beyond the noise, she finally allowed herself to believe that staying hadn't made her weak. It had made her ready for a life she would no longer borrow, but build. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in the face of betrayal is not to scream, not to fight, but to stand still and watch. Because truth has a way of revealing itself when you stop chasing validation and start collecting your peace. Not every battle is won with fists. Some are won with silence, wisdom, and strategy. Don't let anyone confuse your patience for weakness. And remember, even quiet women can move mountains when the time is right. May your heart never be a resting place for fear, and may your silence never be mistaken for surrender. May God give you the strength to walk away from what was designed to break you and the grace to rise without bitterness. May the tables turn in your favor without you ever having to lift a finger in revenge. May your scars speak of survival and your steps be ordered into places where love, peace, and dignity overflow. And when your moment of victory comes, may it be loud enough for every silent tear you once cried. In Jesus' name, amen. Hope you enjoyed this interesting story. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. See you again in my next story.